Hey guys, JuV Day 22, and season of Doctor Who finished last night, so let's do a little review of the entire season, because I want to talk about it and my thoughts. I've really enjoyed a lot of this season. It's been back to a standard that I appreciated a bit more. Like, it's not perfect, I'm not going to claim that by any means, but it's definitely a lot better again. I feel like Moffat was Moffating a lot in his time, and yeah, some of it was just of a specific way of doing things, and then I didn't particularly like the writing under Chibnall, so basically I really liked the sort of general consistency and quality of the original Russell T Davies era, and now we've got him back again, and so it feels like the writing feels a lot more consistent to that same era as before in some ways, but like Moffat was occasionally very good in his stuff, so he was a very hit or miss person, so some of the best Moffat stuff is definitely like better than a lot of stuff in the RTD series, but this like the baseline's higher for the Russell's time, so it, you know, that's a feeling that I've got. I don't think it's an uncommon feeling, but it's a feeling that I've got. Okay, from here on out, spoilers are very much in effect. This series has been very concerned with Ruby and her backstory and stuff, not necessarily with her character in some ways. I feel like she's a less defined character than some of the other companions we've had over the years, but I feel like a lot of the stuff with her has been pretty strong in some ways, but it's not perfect. It's very much, she feels a little underdeveloped, and part of that I think is the episode run times, and part of that's just how many episodes she's got as the only companion. And like, you know, we've had this whole mystery about who's her mum, what's going on with that, and then the way it got resolved in last night's episode was obviously her mum's not actually anyone in particular, it's she's no one special, and that's a thematic beat that I love. I just don't think the execution was as strong as it could have been. I feel like including the magical snow was maybe a bit of a weird thing to include, but it is difficult to say. I think that some of the execution was weak, but I love the point thematically. Like, we need to be elevating the fact that ordinary people are fucking amazing. Just, you know, ordinary is a fantastic thing. And, you know, the Doctor has always said this throughout the entire modern Who series. I think probably in some classic stuff, but I haven't watched as much classic stuff as I have of modern. So, so much of it has been, you know, ordinary people can do amazing things. Look at Rose. Literally the first story, she's like, oh, I don't have any A-levels, I don't know this, but I do have a gymnastics certificate that I got bronze in. Whee! Like, it's a whole thing. The characterization of the Doctor has been pretty interesting, because we're very much in reinvention still. There's a lot where we're doing stuff with the Doctor changing, like, because the modern interpretation that we've had has had a lot of survivor's guilt and stuff built up, and there's been a lot of, like, you know, I'm so melancholy and I've got this and da-da-da-da, and I am this way, and then Shooty immediately came in the giggle going, we don't need to be like that anymore. Let's not be like that. Let's get away from that. And has mostly managed to stick with that over the course of this season. There's not been any of the too much of this like doing bits of like being all sorry for themselves and doing all of that. Like it's a really interesting way of doing it, and I think that it's contributing to a greater characterization of the Doctor in a way that the Ruby hasn't had in the same way, and it's trying to open up what the Doctor can be in some ways, and I think that's cool. I think that's a cool thing. Now, the plot, obviously leading up to Sutekh, a lot of this story has been very standalone each individual week. There's obviously been the through line of Susan Twist stuff, but more or less every one has been a standalone story without having to cover a whole grand narrative. And I think that was a strong decision in a lot of ways, but which led to this Sutekh story. And I think that worked reasonably well. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I really loved the memory TARDIS in last night's episode. Is a whole, like, again, just some bits with the execution could have been tweaked a little bit. And I think that there's some fantastic stuff in there, though. Like, a couple of moments where things could have been just tweaked and it would have been a little bit better, but just a stellar way of doing things. I don't think that this comes up quite to some of the best seasons of Doctor Who in general. I think that if we were going back to my ranking of them from the other day, I'd say that this is probably sort of low A, high B, as these things go. Like, I think that is a pretty good point to include that. I think that my feelings on this season are that it's setting up a lot. I think that in the same way that some of the earlier seasons, I think season 6, which is one of the weakest ones. In fact, I personally think it's the weakest one. That's one of the things in my modern ranking. I think that it is falling into that. It's doing a lot of setting up. So it's setting up, yeah, we're going to have Susan back in there. I think that's going to be the Doctor's overall goal for the future now, is we're going to have him trying to get back and find Susan. Maybe it's not going to be a huge one that he's working towards every episode, but I think that that's one of the key things that's going to be driving the Doctor, is trying to make himself feel worthy of Susan, or make himself feel like he needs to, I think that in the same way that Matt Smith's Doctor towards the end, and Peter Capaldi, and basically the entire Moffat run, it was leading up to Gallifrey coming back and finding a way of getting back to Gallifrey. I think that this is very much going to be the new direction in some ways, is go back, find Susan. Same with the Rogue situation, is also going to have a whole bit. It's definitely setting that up. And I think that the Mrs. Flood stuff is going to get set up into another arc, possibly next season. I don't know. We'll find out as it goes on. I think that there's a lot of setup, and a lot of things are going to be able to be moved into the next seasons as we go, and I think that that's good. I think that it proves that we've got some long-running ideas that we can come back to. I think that there's some solid things that, especially if Russell decides to leave without completely tying them up, whoever the next showrunner is will have a lot of stuff to make the journey into it feel more connected, which I think is one of the problems with a lot of earlier stuff. The connective tissue between the first RTD era and the Moffat era is a bit weak and doesn't really, it's not really there that much. The connective tissue between the Moffat era and the Chibnall era is also basically non-existent. but so far, Russell has been really good at picking up on things that Chibnall did not resolve, and is sort of paying off them a bit more, and there feels like there's more depth to some of the stuff, and I feel like Russell is definitely one of the best showrunners for being able to pick it up and carry it on. He's not just leaving things on the floor like the other two did at times, just kind of, oh yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Political messaging in Doctor Who, I think that we've had quite a bit of it in this one, and I think that it's a bit more subtle and a bit better than it was in the Chibnall era, which was very on the nose in some ways, and not necessarily the most skillfully done. So I think that it was good. I think that there's some really good stuff, and I'm looking forward to what comes next. I'm also intrigued as to who's going to come next after Russell when he eventually stops, because he's not going to be doing it forever again. I think that I could see Kate Herron, maybe Bryony Redman, I don't know them, apart from the fact that they co-wrote Rogue with Kate Herron. I think that there's some solid options there, and yeah, I think that there's some really solid stuff, and I think it's a good foundation for building into a new era. And it's not necessarily the strongest season, but it's a good foundation, and I think that that's good. Finally, before I finish, I just want to say that I've not been a fan of this midnight releases that we've been getting. It's stupid. I do not think that it's been a good idea. It benefits no one other than Americans, and it's a British show. Don't do it. Like, it needs to be based from home before it goes off to them. Just put it on the TV properly and then do the stream afterwards. It's not that hard. I just want to not have to avoid social media for hours before I can really get a chance to watch the episode. It's just not a good plan. Editing James here, I just realised I forgot to say about a theory that I have, which is that each episode of this series has been concerned with like a different aspect of the human condition. So the Church on Ruby Road is very much about like origins, effectively, and coincidence and pattern recognition, and the Space Babies is all about like having stories. We need stories to exist, in much the same way as the Hogfather in Discworld. That whole book is about that basic idea as well. Then we have the Devil's Chord, which is about how we need music and we need fun and that sort of thing. Then we had Boom, which is about like faith and being able to move through things and family and that sort of thing. 73 Yards is about abandonment and sort of the dark side, but also the good as well. Obviously, Dot and Bubble is about the dark side in even more, in that it's about race and prejudice and being blinded by social stuff. Then we've got, after that, Rogue, which is about, like, you know, patterns again in some ways, you could say, in the form of, like, cosplay and doing, like, having a romantic interest, but also, like, scandal. And then we've got the two-part finale, which is about, like, origins again, just tying up the stuff from Ruby Road, and, like, life, death, and doing, like, the right thing and stuff. Yeah, basically, this season has been about being human. So those are my thoughts on the Doctor Who season that's just finished. Yeah, I would love to know what you thought of it in the comments down below, but please be respectful. Like, not just to me, but also to anybody else's comments. I would really love to know your thoughts. Just please don't be mean. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and that you remember to like and share it, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the thumbnails over there to see other videos by me, click on the link in the description down below to join my Discord, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next day of JuV.